A people at the brink of extinction. All that's left are the ashes of their history, yet with much determination turn a single ember into a roaring flame. The Ainu effectively stood against the Japanese government in an attempt to preserve their culture through taking part in Japanese legislation, highlighting Ainu culture, and fighting for their rights. As a result, the Ainu were able to rekindle the dwindling culture. The Ainu are an indigenous people of northern Japan. The remaining descendants live mainly in Hokkaido, Sakhalin, the Kuril Islands, and the northeastern part of Honshu Island. The origin of their name comes from their language. Ainu means human in the original Ainu language. They are a people who have a deep reverence for nature and the belief that gods exist in all things. They believe that each entity comes from its own world and returns there after accomplishing its role. This view of life and the wisdom of their lifestyle is now recognized as ecological living. After all these years, the Ainu population has dwindled down significantly. A survey conducted by the Hokkaido government in 2006 indicated that 23,782 Ainu were living in Hokkaido at that time. Although the Japanese government wanted the Ainu to be recognized as Japanese, when comparing the two, they are fairly different. The Ainu are much shorter with lighter skin and robust bodies, and are also hairier with wavy hair. The Ainu were hunters, not gatherers. They fished for salmon and tracked bear and deer. Religious life centered on shamans and an annual bear festival, during which the divine spirit of a captured bear was freed by sacrificing it. According to Brett Walker, who is a professor of history at Montana State University, he states, since the 1400s, they lived peacefully among themselves in nature on the island of Izo. When the 1600s came along, things were no longer peaceful. Japan had begun to assert its dominance over Izo. This led to one of history's most doomed rebellions. Shakushin's Revolt, they called it, after the octogenarian Ainu chief who led it, pitting 30,000 or so ill-organized tribesmen against a nation of 25 million in Stone Age military technology against the modern firearms of Japan. He lost, of course. Just one Japanese soldier died fighting the rebels, and Shakushin himself was ruthlessly assassinated as soon as a peace treaty was signed. While the Ainu suffered in short term while enduring the influx of Japanese on their island, and even harsher trade terms, it no longer seems quite clear who the real victors were in the long run. Today, Shakushin has become an inspiration to new generations of Ainu nationalists. What we are facing now is neither the Ainu as a race, nor the Ainu as a people, but simply Ainu as a situation. A situation in which people call us Ainu, and the meaning of that Ainu comes to constrain our lives. These were the words that the Ainu poet and writer Sasaki Misao used to describe the current situation of the Ainu people. As the Ainu language and culture continued to falter, many began to lose hope. In 1899, the Japanese Parliament enacted the Hokkaido Former Aborigines Protection Act, a law designed to achieve the assimilation of the Ainu population of northern Japan. This law considered the Ainu as former Aborigines, implying that they were no longer Ainu, but Japanese. It outlawed the Ainu language, forced them to farm on government-provided land plots, prohibited them to hunt deer, forced them to abandon their culture and religion and assimilate to the Japanese culture and lifestyle in hopes of the Ainu culture disappearing for good. They were subject to discrimination and called dogs and perceived as uncultured, barbaric, and lazy. The Ainu, however, have never been passive victims of colonization. By the early 20th century, a number of Ainu leaders were voicing resistance to the prejudice that they were experiencing in Japanese society. During the 1930s, a number of Ainu activists also participated in campaigns by the newly created Ainu Association of Hokkaido for the revision of the Protection Act. At this stage, though, many Ainu accepted the prevailing view that prejudice and disposition would be best resisted by acquiring civilization in a form of education and majority Japanese modes of dress, housing, and diet. It was not until the 1950s and 1960s that the Ainu activists began to place growing emphasis on the revival of disappearing craft skills, rituals, and types of indigenous knowledge. Among them was Kayano Shigeru, who put together a large collection of Ainu artifacts now displayed in the Ainu Cultural Museum at Nibutani. During the 1960s, while Kayano and the others were promoting the revival of the Ainu culture, Ainu political consciousness was being highly influenced by the U.S. Civil Rights Movement. In the decades that followed, other trends like this continued to further influence the political conscience. In 1983, he established Hokkaido's first language school using his own resources. He has since then been striving to hand down and disseminate the Ainu language. In 1994, Kayano became the first Ainu member of the Japanese parliament, taking up seat in the upper house, positioning himself in a leading role. So began a prolonged campaign which led to the passing of the 1997 Cultural Promotion Law. However, as its name suggests, the law took up only one part of the original Ainu proposal, which was the part concerned with culture. The Ainu Cultural Protection Law failed to measure up to the hopes of the Ainu activists, who had been campaigning for decades. Above all, it failed to provide any acknowledgement of Ainu calls for land or resource rights, or for political demands for indigenous representation in central or local government. The Act provides government financial support for teaching, promoting, and researching Ainu culture, which it defines as consisting of the Ainu language as well as music, drama, crafts, and other cultural properties passed down by Ainu and other cultural properties developed therefrom, as well as seeking to promote the maintenance of culture as a source of Ainu identity. The law also addresses the issue of coexistence by encouraging the inclusion of material on Ainu language and traditions in mainstream education and media. In late 2008, the Ainu were publicly recognized as the indigenous Japanese, and those who remained tried to preserve what was left of their culture. The Ainu Association has played a big role in improving the Ainu living conditions in Japan, such as providing loans, establishing jobs, and promoting education. They also helped out in activities for the preservation, transmission, and development of ethnic culture, interaction, and exchange of information with various other indigenous peoples. In 2006, a band called the Ainu Rebels was formed. Its goal was to focus on highlighting Ainu culture through music and dance, which has been fused with hip-hop and rap music. Governments, advocates, and foundations have looked into preserving the language and promote transmission and research into revitalizing the culture before it dies out forever. For nearly 100 years, the Ainu people lived in Japan under a policy of extinction by assimilation. They were forbidden by the Japanese government to practice Ainu customs or even speak their own language in hopes that the Ainu would vanish from the face of the planet. Although the Ainu culture is on the brink of extinction, it seems that more and more effort is going into bringing it back to life. These days, young Ainu such as the Ainu Rebels are doing their best to create an identity for their people and make Japan more open to minorities. Many Japanese still believe that the Ainu are primitive people who haven't modernized and still live in their old traditions. Many Ainu activists say that a focus on educating the wider Japanese population about their history and culture is a priority. Many still ponder the question, how and by whom is Ainu cultural heritage defined? Ainu commentator Tahara Ryoko points out in a recent collection of essays on the new law, Ainu culture is not limited to the language or ceremonies or dance. It is Ainu life itself. Whatever happens every day within the household is Ainu culture. It remains undecided whether the Japanese government is willing to provide support for the transmission of such visions of Ainu culture. For many Ainu people and their political supporters, the Ainu Promotion Law is not the end of a struggle for recognition, but rather an ongoing process of negotiation with the Japanese state about the boundaries of self-determination. It is important that at least the law marks recognition by the state that there is something to negotiate about and someone to negotiate with. With this, it breaks the assumption that Japanese citizens share a single race, culture, and identity. This is a new phase of negotiation, and it will be a long and difficult one in which the outcome still remains uncertain.